Hello and welcome to another video from fantasyfootballscout.co.uk. We're building up to the final game week of the 2018-19 season this week, and we've also obviously had our last scoutcast to help prep people for the season. But today we're going to be looking at the captaincy, which obviously is a big issue for a lot of people, potential differentials for people as well, as we have one last hurrah. So joining me as ever is Neale. How are you feeling about this final captaincy decision? Are you in a good place, or are you racking your brains?
Yeah, more the latter, I think. There's obviously two fixtures that stand out, which we'll get to first, with the two games that anything's riding on, really, Liverpool and Man City. But I've got the sense that it'll be one of those game weeks where you'll get a left field high scorer. As is often the case in game week 38, there's always loads of goals. And I think the best captaincy candidate will come from a game outside of those matches at the Amex and Anfield. It's just nailing who that is. It's the problem.
Yeah.
We'll discuss the other differentials later on, but we'll start with the two most obvious choices, I guess, over at Brighton and at Liverpool as well.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, obviously, when we come into this final day of the season, often what people tend to look at is, who's got something left to play for. And sadly, from a neutral perspective, we kind of thought that maybe we might have a bit of a relegation battle still going. Perhaps maybe the battle for the top four still going. Maybe for that seventh place. But pretty much everything's wrapped up now, apart from the league title. So, if people are going to be making their decisions based on what people, based on what they think teams are going to be fighting for, then you're absolutely right. The place to start is at Brighton, really, because Man City, all they've got to do is win, and it doesn't matter what Liverpool do at Anfield. Man City will be champions. So it looks as if that's already influencing a lot of people on the captaincy poll. So Aguero is currently top, around 23%. Sterling's in second place on about 18-19%. So, a lot of people are already looking at these options. But obviously, earlier in the week, Neale, you had a bit of a look at the Brighton defence, because they did quite a good job of stifling Arsenal in the home game. So Brighton were away there. Arsenal needed to win it to try and get in the top four, and Brighton stood firm. So, I mean, let's start with the defence. I mean, do we think that this fixture actually looks like the right place for captaincy?
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because as you alluded to there, half the battle in May is picking a captaincy candidate that's definitely going to play. So we can be pretty sure that the likes of Sterling, Aguero, Salah, Mane are going to play this weekend. Whether there's still that element of doubt with the other 8 dead rubbers up and down the country. Man City, as you say, that's where the votes are heading at the moment in the captaincy poll. Yeah, Brighton, I think on paper you think this is the easier of the two fixtures, isn't it? Wolves have had a really good season. They're going to finish 7th. They've got this track record of performing well against the big six. Brighton, who we were all let down by, weren't we, in game week 34, 35. It looks like, to the casual observer, that this is the easiest fixture. And it still might prove that way. But Brighton's last 4 fixtures, they've already conceded 3 goals, and they've played Wolves, Spurs and Arsenal away in 3 of those 4 games, as well as Newcastle at home. So they're not shipping loads of goals, and they haven't really done that all season either. So against the big six, so the top half dozen clubs, they've only conceded more than 2 goals on 1 occasion. So this is in 11 games against the big six so far. They're only hammering, I suppose you could call it, was away at Chelsea, which was a 3-0, which was fairly recently, but that was before the FA Cup semi-final, when I think you maybe had one eye on that. The other games this season, they haven't kept a clean sheet, it should be said, against the big six yet, but they've conceded 1 goal on 5 occasions and 2 goals on another 5 occasions. So they haven't done too badly. Liverpool have only beaten them 1-0 twice. City, only 2-0 winners in the reverse fixture back in game week 7, I think it was. And they only beat them 1-0 in the FA Cup semi-final recently as well. So Brighton's done all right, really, in terms of defending against these bigger clubs. I think if players into Houghton's hands, I think he's a casual manager by nature. And I think the Brighton fans sort of don't like that when they're meant to attack, or when they're at home against the lesser sides. I think his sort of default is to protect, to sit on a solid platform at the back and don't concede, which I think is more suited to a game against one of the top half dozen clubs. So this last 4 matches, when they've only conceded 3, as I said, against Wolves, Spurs, Arsenal, Newcastle. Yes, they rank 17th for shots in the box conceded, which is towards the lower end of the table. But only 4 clubs have allowed fewer big chances during the spell. So that's 3 away games against top 7 teams. They've managed this feat in. So they're not doing too badly, really. Yes, City are a bit of an exception. There was a good point made by a commenter on Twitter this morning saying that, shall we really group City and Liverpool into this big 6 because they're so far away, head and shoulders above the other 4. Do you know what I mean? You can't really equate City's performances with United's, for example. But they have proven already, Brighton, that they can restrain Liverpool and Man City to narrow defeats. So yeah, we've seen City in the past couple of weeks be fairly tense in these must-win games. 1-0 away at Burnley, 1-0 against Spurs, 1-0 against Leicester, 2-0 against United. So they haven't been racking up the goals either. So I wouldn't be entirely shocked if this is another tight affair. An early goal might swing it, but based on the stats, I think Brighton are going to prove more of a stiff opposition than perhaps we thought. I think the one hope, if you're a Sterling and Aguero owner or captain there, is that they showed a bit more attacking ambition against Arsenal, Brighton. They had plenty of chances, even in stoppage time when they were at 1-1. Did you see that incident where they were breaking away? Andoni should have slipped through
yes.
March. So they were piling bodies forward. So that might play into City's hands if they decide to show a bit more attacking ambition. But how's City's side looking anyway from an offensive perspective? I've managed to put doubts in people's mind about Brighton's defence.
Well, I mean, it's all adding up to turn into something that might actually convince a few people to change their mind, because just as Brighton have, as you said, restricted these big teams, restricted Man City and Liverpool as well. As you say, Man City have been quite tense in a lot of their recent games. They seem to have switched tack. At the beginning of the season, they were a team that just scored 1 more than you, but then in the last 12 games have kept 10 clean sheets. They've kind of reverted to the age-old adage of, defence wins you championships, and it does look as if that's going to be what is going to win it for them. And that seems to have taken a toll on the attacking options. So, Aguero, he's just got 1 goal in his last 5 matches, and he's been afforded no big chances in the last 4 as well. What we've got up on the table on the screen right now is a table of just all players' last 4 matches sorted by shots on target. And but Bernardo Silva, for example, has more shots on target than Aguero does recently. He's had more shots than him as well. I mean, effectively, you've got a situation where Aguero's accuracy is actually quite low as well. So he's still having a fair number of shots, but he's just not getting many on target. And as we said already, none of them have been big chances either. So Bernardo Silva's on a 37.5% accuracy. Aguero's on just 27% in the last 4 matches, and that's considerably below his season average of 36% as well. So anyone who's watched Aguero recently and thought he doesn't really quite look at the races, I mean, the stats are backing that up as well. He's below the level that he's been putting out, in the last 4 matches. And as I said, when it comes to accuracy, 17 players have had more shots on target in the last 4 matches than him. And frustratingly, also for those who are looking at Sterling perhaps as the alternative, because he's second place in the poll right now, he actually looks, arguably from the stats, even worse, which is really frustrating. So he's had fewer shots than Aguero. He's had just 9, 7 in the box, 3 on target, which means that if you're looking at this table on the screen right now, you won't actually find Sterling, because we've sorted it by shots on target, and he doesn't even make the top 20. His accuracy, again, it's higher than Aguero's. It's 33.3%, but again, it's another Man City player who's considerably below their average accuracy for the season. His is 48%, which is really high. He's had a really great season of being really clinical, but that seems to have just kind of dropped off recently, as has his number of shots as well. And then when we look at, as I said, the quality of chances aren't looking too great either. They're not fashioning as many big chances as they were earlier in the season. You've got a situation when you look at the expected goals that Phil Foden has a higher XG in the last 4 matches than Aguero and Sterling. It's crazy. I mean, Foden's obviously played well, but no one's going to captain Phil Foden for this game. And so then there is a lot of reason to look at this Man City situation, and I think we've covered it quite extensively from both angles. Not only will Brighton probably be more of a hindrance than perhaps we might assume, just because they don't even necessarily need anything to play for. As you say, their natural default is to sit back on a solid defence. It worked against Arsenal, where admittedly, aren't as offensively experienced under such a great manager like Guardiola, but there's definitely a lot of reason. I was looking at Sterling, I said on the Tuesday night Scoutcast, but now having gone into a lot more detail, both from your side and from what I've looked at as well, I really am thinking that I'm probably not going to go for a Man City option because, to be honest, and we should talk about it now, a lot of Aymeric Laporte was actually the number one on the captain poll for the first sort of 2 hours. He's slipped right down now. He's on 8%. He's in 5th place. But to be honest, I think I'd probably be more inclined to captain Laporte in this game than one of the attacking options, because them scoring a hatful of goals seems a lot less likely than them keeping a clean sheet. I mean, what do you think? How do you see Laporte in this context?
Well, I've learned my lesson from captain Shane Duffy in was it Gameweek 34? Never captain a defender. That was my mantra for years and years and years. I bent it for that one game week and I was duly punished. But yeah, I can understand. I mean, obviously, Man City's defence is a different calibre to Brighton's. I've lost track of the number of clean sheets now. Is it something like 11 and 14 or something like that?
It's a huge amount. I think it's 10 in the last 12 is what I'm pretty certain of.
I mean, this calendar year, they're head and shoulders above, I think, even Everton, who have been really impressive. Yeah, I can see that. Laporte, I would be amazed if he doesn't start. This is going to be a full-strength team, isn't it? And we discussed this last week. He's the one centre-half who everyone else revolves around. So they'll bring in Stones one week, Company the next. Company will probably, I would think, get the nod alongside him, particularly given Brighton's going to be playing a lot of long balls and, Company's got that aerial prowess. I mean, Brighton have been conceding a lot of chances from set plays. So if you're looking at it from that angle, from Laporte's perspective, he's often in and around corner kick situations for City. He scored a couple this season, or at least assisted a couple as well. I would, stop short of captain and defender, especially in game week 38, even though it is Brighton v Man City.
Yeah.
I think it was last week's digest. I did a little piece on the number of goals scored in game week 38. Everyone has the sort of sense that there is a goal fest always on the end of the season, and that does pan out in the statistics actually. So I think the average number of goals in game week 38 has always been higher than the season average, as far back as our records go anyway, which is 8 years. It only takes a lumped ball into Glenn Murray for that clean sheet to go. Despite of the evidence of recent weeks when City have been so impressive, it's not that the defence has really been tested as much as the fact that they just keep the ball. They don't give the opposition the chance to create chances. We saw Leicester breach them a couple of times, didn't we, on Monday night? Iheanacho should have scored. But Leicester's obviously got a lot more about them than Brighton have in attack. So I do think that's probably, I'm not sure, was it Andy who went for Man City on the Scoutcast this week for the clean sheet?
I think so, yeah.
Probably the best chance of a clean sheet in game week 38. I definitely agree. It's just whether you think there are better options than that elsewhere for a captaincy. And I do think that. But I wouldn't be surprised if Laporte racked up another 9-pointer, clean sheet and 3 bonus again this week.
Yeah, he'll do it simply because you haven't captained him, and if you do, he won't. I mean, that's just generally how defenders work. The only other person I'd just like to mention on the Man City front is Bernardo Silva, because I know that a lot of people have been looking at him this week potentially as a Son replacement. Having a look at just the raw figures, more shots than Aguero, fewer in the box but more on target, and so then he's ahead of Sterling for all 3 of those, and has created more chances than Sterling as well. If he's playing on the right of that front 3 or maybe the left, if he's used in the front 3, then that obviously boosts his potential. His XG is lower than Aguero and Sterling's, but his expected assists is higher than both of those. So, he's not exactly a standout candidate, but he's definitely a potential alternative. And also, as we covered on the Scoutcast this week, he's also in the goals imminent table as well, and has 2 goals in, I think, his last 4 away matches. So, a lot of people are looking for differentials, and if you fancy Man City to kind of shake off a lot of the concerns that we've discussed, and you still want a differential, then maybe Bernardo Silva is the one to look at. But we should move on to the other big fixture of this game, which is Liverpool against Wolves. Now, there's loads of talking points here. loads of different things to think about. I mean, not least because we thought that they weren't going to be in the Champions League final. That's now at the back of Klopp's mind, perhaps. You've got they might find that Man City are 3-0 up at half time, and so then it doesn't matter what they do because they can't win the league. That could play into it as well. Yeah. But I think perhaps maybe the biggest question that people are asking that we can analyse with some data is we'll come on to the individual players in a minute, but just let's talk about Wolves just briefly, because we always want to know if the fixture is worth captaining. And as you say, Wolves very good against the top six. So what can we expect from them in this particular game based on the position that they're in right now, and what they're able to do, perhaps maybe away from home, that sort of thing? How are they looking for this game?
Not too bad. I mean, it seems to be my role now to bring you all the negatives associated with captaincy candidates, which sort of fits in with my personality, really. I mean, they've come in this game off the bat of 3 consecutive wins. So any sort of talk of an FA Cup final, semi-final hangover has been banished. Yes, they've haven't played a great number of teams in that 10-man Arsenal, for example, and then Fulham last week, but they're posting some decent underlying defensive stats anyway, which don't always translate into clean sheets, it should be said. So last 4 shots on target, 4 conceded. That's the lowest in the division. 15 shots in the box conceded. That's the joint lowest in the division. And 4 big chances conceded, which is the joint second best. So defensively, they're doing all right. Now, yes, you've got to look at who they've played in that run. So, as I said, Fulham, yes, they've been tight with the back recently, but they're not really creating much. Brighton at home they played, and we all know Brighton's limitations. Arsenal, as I said, down to 10 men for much of that game. And those 3 home fixtures within that. So you've got to take that stat with a pinch of salt. But it's still quite impressive. And they've been doing this for quite a lot of the season. So I filtered by second half of the season, which I think is quite a good gauge, because we don't really want to be looking at stuff that happened in August. It doesn't really have much relevance. But second half of the season, they've played everyone almost once. Obviously, this game week 38 is the last fixture. And we're only going back 3 or 4 months instead of 8. So second half of the season, joint fourth best or joint 4th best for shots on target, shots in the box, and big chances conceded. So they're doing all right. What I'll say there is they're not always converting these promising defensive stats into clean sheets. So they've only got 4 in 2019. We saw this last season, which I think it was Burnley, wasn't it, in the second half of the season? They were posting some decent numbers, but they always conceded 1. And that seems to be the case for Wolves a lot. I think over this season, let's have a quick look how many they've got over the season. 9 clean sheets. So that's even less than Newcastle have. So I don't expect a mauling at the hands of Liverpool, but I think they will concede. They inevitably do. They sort of almost shoot themselves in their own foot. Sometimes we saw what happened against Watford when Bennett played that steady back pass and that lets Gray in to score. But their record against the Big Six isn't that bad. We know about Jimenez's credentials, for example, against the Big Six, but defensively, it's not that bad either. So they've played 5 of the top half dozen clubs away from home already. Liverpool's going to be the 6th. They've only lost once, and that was away at Man City when they were reduced to 10 men with, I think, about 70 minutes left. I think Willy Body got sent off, didn't he, in that game after about 18 minutes. So
yeah, that's right.
They played a lot of that. They were doing all right up until that point. I remember watching that game, and so we can't really take that match into consideration. So there are other 4 games, away games against the Big Six. They've drawn 3 and won 1. So they've never conceded more than 1 goal in those 4 games. So 3-1 draws, and then they beat Spurs 3-1 at Wembley. So they're doing all right. They're doing pretty good. As I mentioned before, Liverpool and City are cut above the rest. So Liverpool held them to 0 at Molineux in the reverse fixture, beat them 2-0. And obviously City's beat them 3-0 at the Etihad. So I think it'll be, again, a bit like the Brighton game, maybe tighter than we anticipate. You could argue that obviously Liverpool's more of a threat on home soil than City are away, you'd say. That's certainly where Liverpool have been scoring the goals of late. That's where Mane and Salah have been getting a lot of their returns, which you'll come on to in a second. But as you mentioned there in the little intro, that it's the stuff we can't control. So if City go 2 or 3-0 up early on, then how motivated are Liverpool going to be to go for the jugular against Wolves? Yes, there's stuff to go for, personal goals to go for within that. Mohamed Salah for the Golden Boot, for example. And they'll be buoyed by what happened on Tuesday. So I think if they'd lost to Barcelona and this was their only chance of a trophy, then I think they'd be deflated if City ran into an early lead. As it happens, they know they've got this Champions League final to come. They might have already written off the league to an extent. Anything that happens this Sunday is going to be a bonus, knowing that they've got the fallback of the Champions League to win a trophy. So that an early Man City lead might not have the sort of deflating effect that we might expect, given what happened at Anfield in midweek. But certainly enough to be considering from a Wolves perspective in terms of their defensive capabilities to suggest they won't make it easy for Liverpool. Even though my own knee-jerk decision was to put the armband on Salah, I think, for this, for a number of reasons, and I'm sure you'll probably expand on them now as to which of Salah and Mane, if any of them, you think is the best option to go for.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the difference here between Liverpool and Man City, because as you say, there is cause for sort of concern about the opposition for both teams for sort of different reasons. The difference, the advantage that Liverpool have is that, as you say, at home they are considerably more devastating than Man City can be away. So, we've got on the screen right now just comparison between Salah, Mane and Firmino, both sort of raw numbers, how many shots they're having versus the quality of their shots as well. And it's looking pretty good for Salah and Mane in particular. So Salah right now, in the last 4 matches, he's top for shots in the whole league, 21, top for shots in the box, the whole league with 16, and he's had 10 shots on target, which is 3 more than second placed Mikel Antonio, sort of out of nowhere, with 7 shots on target in the last 4. So just on a slight side note, another differential potentially. He's been having a lot of shots on target, but that just shows you how far ahead Salah is on that particular statistic. That no one is even level with him, and the second place 3 shots on target behind, 47% accuracy. So quite a strong accuracy there. Mane's obviously a little bit below that in the last 4 matches, and also at home as well, as you can see on the screen as well. He's actually behind. Mane's actually behind Aguero for number of shots and number of shots in the box, but he's ahead of him for shots on target. So that just kind of shows that in the last 4, generally a lot more, accurate. He's got a higher accuracy of 45.5% as well. And also in the last 4 matches, Mane is joint top for big chances. So plenty of reasons to see these two players as better. There's no arguing it. They're in better form, really, than Aguero and Sterling. That can be seen in the underlying data, and it can also be seen in just the goals that they've scored and the attacking returns they've pulled in. If you want to compare the two, because I know that if you're looking at this particular fixture, you probably are going to be thinking it's going to be, I need to work out some way of differentiating between Salah and Mane. And the annoying thing is I'm just going to have to tell you once again, it is just the same old story between these two players. They both excel in different areas and both stand a decent chance of getting a haul. So, as I said, on the screen right now, last 4 home matches, when we compare Salah against Mane, Salah is top for shots. He's had 23 shots. Mane's had 14. He's top for shots in the box. He's had 14. Mane's had 11. Top for shots on target as well. He's had 8 of those. And he's ahead for chances created as well, with 11 chances created versus Mane's 8. But we have to also consider that Mane, whilst doing less of all of those things, is doing it better and in better areas, because he's still top for big chances out of the 2 of them. He's had 7, and in actual fact only one player has had more big chances in their last 4 home matches than Mane, and we will come on to him later because he's an exciting differential for Gameweek 38. And he's also, crucially, just in this comparison, ahead of Salah for XG as well, with 3.46. And actually, Firmino is ahead of Salah for XG as well, because a lot of people obviously celebrating that incredible goal he scored against Chelsea, but as we've sort of said time and time again, with these incredible, impressive goals he scores, you can't really bank on him to do it again. The XG for that is very low because it's a difficult chance to convert. On the opposition in these games, there's not a lot really concerns me, because they've done it, these last 4 home matches, they've kind of done it against all sorts of teams. They put 5 past Huddersfield, but we all expected that. But they largely dominated Chelsea. They beat Spurs, and they scored 4 against Burnley. And Burnley are hardly a team that get mauled very often. So plenty of reason to believe that, if there's ever a time when Wolves could be turned over, it is probably this one, because Liverpool are so good at Anfield. So plenty of reasons to consider these two players. But as I said, if you want to differentiate between the two of them, I think it comes down to what you look for as a fantasy manager, in terms of, do you like someone who shoots a lot? Because theoretically, by sort of law of averages, they're more likely to score. But if Mane's in better positions, maybe he's more likely to score. And the thing is, right now, it might sort of depend on your rank as well. And I think we said this, last couple of weeks. On the Salah versus Mane debate, it is a bit like a broken record. It may come down to the fact that Mane, very, very highly owned in the top 10k, something like second or third most owned. And Salah has just kind of creeped in. His big haul against Huddersfield pulled him into the top 5, but it was still only around sort of 39%, whereas Mane's looking at more sort of 60, 70. So maybe Salah's the one to go for. I mean, if you can't decide between the two, because he perhaps maybe a more powerful differential, if you're looking for a decent overall rank. So it is difficult, but there are certain ways that we can potentially differentiate. One thing that we should talk about, though, and I'm sure that people are probably saying it in the chat as well, Salah does have this concussion protocol that he's going through right now, and generally, I mean, I'm not too concerned about this, and I don't think you are as well. I mean, I'll ask you just a bit about what you think on this. Just you're the team news man. You know a lot about what Liverpool sort of get up to and how Klopp likes to treat his players. I mean, you're not that worried about him missing this game or maybe not being at 100%.
No, not at all. I mean, we saw him getting involved on Tuesday night, didn't we, with the celebrations and that, running onto the pitch. Looked absolutely fine. Klopp pretty much confirmed that in his pretty much press conference on Monday, saying that he's going to be all right. There wasn't a definitive enough answer to remove the flag, I think, in FPL. But I think it's a 60 or 70 concussion protocol, which would be fine in either situation, because between that Newcastle game and the Wolves game, there's 8 days, so he should be fine. He looks all right. There's obviously a bigger doubts over Firmino and Robertson, which we'll address hopefully tomorrow in the team news video. There's a lot of press conferences going on tomorrow. But I as I say, my initial bus team, when I set it up after the deadline last Friday, was to put the armband on Salah. And obviously, I'll look forward to reading your Captain Sensible article and consider what we've discussed today as well. But that's who I'm on at the moment. And I know I'll be getting pelters for talking up the negatives of Liverpool and Man City assets, but we have to do that. We have to present all the facts and hopefully let people make judgments of their own. We have to present everything. It's easy just to come on and say, oh, well, captain a Liverpool player, that they're going to score, because they probably will, but there has to be some circumstances to consider on the opposition team as well. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think going back to the original question, I think Salah's going to be fine. I'm pretty sure he will be, but we'll hopefully get conclusive word from Klopp tomorrow in his press conference.
That's the handy thing. We have still got one press conference to go, and a point that Andy made obviously on the Scoutcast was that because all 10 matches are at exactly the same time on Sunday afternoon, I would hold your transfers and make them at 1:55 if you can, 5 minutes before the deadline, because normally, and this is the case for any match, the journalists who are there will normally have a chance to speak to the manager a few minutes before team news comes out, and sometimes they're able to put that out to us, and we might know at 1:57 that Robertson's going to start, we might know that Salah's going to start. So definitely do your transfers as close to the deadline as possible, and your captaincy of course as well, because again, that's the thing with Salah, is if we hear that he's not going to play, then don't captain him.
Tread carefully with that approach as well, because just in case the site crashes with all the traffic.
Yeah. That is true.
Yeah, I think it's happened. It's happened very few times, but I think this is going back a long time. First game of the season, when was it? 7 or 8 years ago, something like that.
I remember it, yeah. And we all got wild card second week.
That's right, yeah, that's exactly what happened. So just be warned, because I expect there'll be a lot of people heading onto the site on about 1:55, but make sure you set up just in case.
Yeah, definitely. We've talked up or talked down, depending on how you look at it, the Man City and Liverpool options. A lot of people looking for differentials, a lot of people looking at the fixtures. Let's look at Man United, simply because of a fixture once again. Now, they all let us down if we backed any of their options, really, in Gameweek 37 with that Huddersfield game. But, it's the last home game of the season. Cardiff are relegated now and, don't have a great deal to play for and haven't been that great away from home. So do we think there's an opportunity that Man United assets might come out of their shell and offer a bit more at home to Cardiff than they did away at Huddersfield?
It's so tricky, isn't it? Because I think the doubts are less about Cardiff. I think we know that they're liable to concede and to lose a game against the Big Six. It's whether we trust Man United. That's just after what happened last week, especially against Huddersfield. So Cardiff, I mean, their record against the Big Six is very poor. So played 11, lost 11, conceded 33. So that's an average of 3 a game. However, Huddersfield had a very similar record going into last week. They'd lost all 11 of their previous fixtures against the Big Six. I think they'd conceded 2 more, 35. And look what happened there. 1-1, poor draw against Man United. Yes, Man United's back on home soil. Yes, Cardiff have got nothing to play for, but neither did Huddersfield. And I think, so Cardiff, for example, last 6, so the bottom 6 for shots on target, big chances conceded, shots in box conceded. But for example, last weekend against Palace, they conceded 21 shots, which would probably have caught the eye of anybody who was thinking about a Man United captain this week. But they had to go for that game. They had to win that game to stand any chance of survival. So it was such an end-to-end game. I think 39 shots in total across that 90 minutes. So they haven't got that need to go for 3 points because they're down. They're relegated. On the flip side, though, they're not likely to go out with a whimper. I mean, Warnock's been pretty much saying as much in his comments this week, saying that he actually wanted Man United to get a top 4 or to be in with a chance of a top 4 place so he could spoil the party at Old Trafford by going there winning.
Classic.
Oh yeah, he's not going down quietly, is he? So I mean, the question of motivation is something you could ask of 18 clubs this week, isn't it? Apart from City and Liverpool, so you can have that negative in your mind about any of the differential captaincy options this week. So yeah, it's probably one of the better fixtures on paper. It's just whether you think Man United players can be trusted, and that's why I'm going to pass back over to you because you'll have done more research on that regard anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean, the answer is no. They don't look particularly trustworthy. Once again, they do just look so poor. Pogba basically. The long story short, if you go through the whole squad for just form players recently, Pogba is the only one who's really offering anything that looks even remotely captainable, just in the sense that he's ahead of everyone else. But it just doesn't compare with some of the options we've already looked at. I mean, we've talked down Aguero and Sterling as captain options, but they still look better than Pogba does in terms of their figures. It's just we expect perhaps more from those Man City players. That's the thing. Last 4 at home, Pogba's had 10 shots, 5 in the box, 3 on target, which is top for Man United players who are fit. Because I think Lukaku has more shots on target, but obviously we're not really expecting him to be involved. He's created 3 chances, which is rubbish, to be honest, from a player who previously under Solskjaer was creating considerably more chances in a 4 match period and was just offering all sorts of things. He played quite poorly at the start of the season, and he was incredible between sort of game weeks, sort of 19 to maybe 30, something like that, and that propelled him to be sort of in the top 5 for chances created, top 5 for shots in the box, shots on target. That was how good he was in that limited period, but it's all completely dropped off now. Rashford's the same. 6 shots in his last 4 home games, 2 in the box, 3 on target. XG of 0.94. Perhaps the only thing that's maybe encouraging from what Pogba's been doing, even though it's numerically considerably lower than a lot of the options we've already discussed, is that his XG at home in the last 4 is 2.05, which isn't too bad. It's in a fairly decent place at the table. So I think that because this is at Old Trafford, I'd be a little bit more inclined to captain Pogba than I was last week. Yes. Especially as people are looking for differentials this week. He's a player who I think is capable of pulling out a haul. I just don't think it's likely. So, again, that just pulls us back to what are you looking to do on the last day of the season? What are you hoping that you want to achieve? I think we've already discussed that if you're up against people who are going to captain a Man City or a Liverpool player, there is the possibility that any number of Aguero, Sterling, Salah and Mane, any of those 4, could potentially blank because of the caveats and the restrictions that their opposition could put on them. So, Pogba's not an awful choice, but he's certainly not one that I would choose to go for if I was, say, in a position of strength. He's more maybe one that people can use as a differential. But outside of him at Man United, there isn't really anyone who's offering anywhere near what he can. So, yeah, I mean, and that's reflected again in the captain poll, to be fair, because Pogba's the most selected in that, and he's on something like 3%. So, generally speaking, it looks like if you're going to have a Man United player, a lot of people have Shaw, but you're not going to captain him. Just the only other thing on Pogba is the penalties as well. But again, like you said last week, what you're really asking for is just like flip a coin that are Man United going to get a penalty. And while Cardiff have conceded a fair few, that doesn't necessarily mean they're gonna get one. Of course, doesn't necessarily mean that Pogba's going to score it either, because he's missed a fair few. Man United have been awarded more penalties than any other team this year, but they're not top for penalties scored because of Pogba's misses. That's Crystal Palace at top penalty scores because Milivojevic is so much more reliable. Let's move on to just a few other differentials, and I'm gonna chime in with one I really like the look of. And the more and more I do this, we've gone through this research, I'm actually more inclined to captain him myself, and that is Jamie Vardy, who in the last 4 home matches, he's the man who is the only man who's had more big chances than Mane in the last 4, with 9 big chances in a 4-match period, which is a huge number. And the great thing about Vardy is that not only is he having lots of big chances, he's also just having lots of shots and lots of shots on target as well. So Vardy is top for shots in the box in the last 4 home matches. He's top for shots on target as well. So really, just sort of across the board of attacking stats, he does look incredible. And he is also top in the last 4 matches for expected goals as well. They're playing Chelsea, who are another team who don't really have a great deal to play for because they're sorted now. They're done and dusted. Champions League football is confirmed. They're going to have this probably quite difficult game against Eintracht Frankfurt on Thursday tonight. That is. So if you're listening to this or watching this tomorrow, you'll have known how that result's gone. But even if they win it, they're probably going to play their best team because they're going to want to book a place in the final. Sarri needs a trophy this season, 100%, because of the stick that he's come under. Whereas of course Leicester won't have had that exertion midweek, and like I said, it's at King Power. It's a home game. They're normally a lot better there anyway. And Chelsea away from home, I think they've got 1 clean sheet away from home since 2019 began. So every reason to believe Leicester will score in this game. And if they're going to do that, I think it's going to be through Vardy. So and really, Vardy kind of offers a lot more. He offers a lot more in these home fixtures than even the Liverpool players do, because while Salah is recording lots of shots and lots on target, the big chances are quite low. With Mane, the big chances are high, but the numeracy of his shots is quite low. But Vardy has both of those things. He has a high number of big chances and a high number of shots total. So, if anything, in terms of form, he looks better than those two. So, he for me, he could be a good captaincy choice even for people in a strong position, because as you've mentioned at the top, the big point scorers this week could be outside those games because it's just a free for all. And are really Chelsea going to be able to mark out Vardy and when they've been exerting themselves in the Europa League? Whereas Wolves and Brighton perhaps more up for it for maybe having a say in the title. So he for me is a great one, maybe if you're in a strong position, but definitely for me the best differential captain if you're looking for someone to choose this week to propel you up the ranks, who probably isn't really going to be picked by that many. He I think in the captaincy poll he's around 1%. Then maybe he's the one to look at. I mean, that's just my personal favourite differential. I don't know if you've picked out any that look particularly strong for this game week, bearing in mind the nature of game week 13 is all over the place, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Vardy. I mean, Chelsea. You say they've actually haven't kept an away clean sheet in 2019. They've played the likes of City, Liverpool away, and I think, but they've also played Fulham and Cardiff on their grounds as well. So they've had the opportunities to keep clean sheets, and they just haven't. They're this Jekyll and Hyde team, aren't they? They're very solid at home. Racked up a lot of clean sheets at Stamford Bridge this season, but just aren't doing it away. And as you say, less than 72 hours after that Frankfurt game, and they're away to Leicester. Leicester did as much as you could have hoped for if you're a Liverpool fan, I think, at Man City last Monday. Had a go as much as they could. And you could tell that even City were worried about Vardy, because in that first half especially, they kept they didn't push up, they didn't have a high line. They were very wary about conceding counter-attacks and allowing Vardy space on the break. And I don't own him, and he's probably one of the players I fear most, I think, in Game Week 38, because I do think there's goals to be had there. Based on what Rodgers has done since he joined, I think I'm right in saying only Liverpool scored more since he was appointed than Leicester. So, yeah, I do think he's a good option this week. Looking elsewhere, it's hard, isn't it? Because as you say, there will be a double-digit haul come from somewhere that we didn't even consider. Now, Southampton at home to Huddersfield is probably the best fixture, and I do think that Hasenhüttl will have a full-strength team out this week. after what happened last weekend. You give chances to the likes of Forster. El Yunusi came in from the complete cold to start. I think Armstrong was playing as well, Lamina. So I think he'll revert back to a near full strength team. He might still give one or two fringe players a chance, but they didn't impress last weekend against West Ham. So you'll see Redmond, for example, who was benched last weekend for the first time, I think, in 2019. And I think only the second time under Hasenhüttl as well. He's been I won't say talismanic figure because he hasn't converted that many of these impressive stats into attacking returns. So only 2 goals in the last 12 game weeks, and they were in the same game against Wolves. Got 3 assists in that time. So modest returns, really. But what you'd expect for a 5.5 million midfielder, you can't be expecting the sort of consistent returns you get from a premium option. But Redmond, a possibility. You'd think he's going to start after a rest last week, or a bit of rotation anyway. Huddersfield, I've been looking at defensive stats today. Yes, they've improved of late. I think Seaworth's been settling on the players he wants to keep. He's been trialling a few players ahead of next season. I think he's decided, so the likes of Billen and Punchin, obviously he was on loan, he doesn't want to consider for next season. So they've improved, I think, at home. They're still getting hammered away. So last 4 away games, they've conceded 15 goals. Most shots in box conceded in that time. Second worst for big chances conceded. They've only scored in 1 of the last 9 away games. So they're not good travellers. And I think there will be goals, St Mary's. Where they're going to come from, that's the thing. Long's been the man in form, hasn't he? He's been converting a lot of the chances. Redmond's due, I think, based on his underlying stats. I think I'm right in saying was he joint 8th best for XGI over the last 6? I'll double check that. It's something like that anyway. But he's amongst the market leaders for expected goal involvement anyway.
Well, he's actually, we were looking at just pure expected goals last 4 for Vardy and Mane. Redmond's 3rd the whole league in that little comparison. Vardy top with 3.56, I think it is. Mane with 3.46, and then Redmond's on about 3.15. So So just from a goal scoring perspective alone, he's doing very well on that. Obviously, the delta for him is minus 1.1 or something, because as you said, he's been a bit unfortunate, not just recently, but kind of in his career. There is that just one sort of slight worry with him that he seems like the guy that always hits the post. So there is that to him. But in a fixture like this, you've just got to assume that he'll get something. So and possibly and definitely an easy one to get to. I think sometimes when we talk about these differential captain picks, a lot of it is going to be determined for some people about can they get to that player without performing large amounts of surgery. And in a week when obviously Son is suspended, Redmond's going to be my replacement for Son. He's going to be the replacement for Son for lots of other people as well. He does look like quite a nice one to look at. You mentioned Shane Long there as well, which is an interesting one as well, because again his ownership is quite low, and again very easy to get to because he's very cheap. So maybe Southampton are the people to look at based on that fixture.
I think it's because Redmond's playing essentially out of position, isn't he? He's been playing a lot as either a striker or just behind the striker of late. So he's got that, for example, advantage over Ward-Prowse, who has been delivering more returns in terms of goals, but his underlying stats aren't as impressive. It's about whether you're willing to trust a man like Redmond who's scored in 1 game in the last 12 versus his underlying stats. If you think they're going to come to fruition finally, then if you're looking for a real maverick last-ditch attempt to claw your way up the rankings, then you're going to have to look at somebody like that, I think, this week. And there's a number of players like that around us. So, for example, I know I mentioned this in the Scout Squad article I did earlier today. Arnautovic looks like knee-jerk reaction of the highest order. He hadn't scored in 4 months before last weekend, but West Ham been playing really well past 3 or 4 weeks. Starting with that Man United away defeat when they should have got something out of that. And Arnautovic had looked promising in the second half against Spurs, then went on to score twice last week. And Watford's have got this awful run of, I think it's now 12 game weeks without a clean sheet, which is the longest in the Premier League. And they've got the FA Cup final the following week as well, so their eyes might be on that. So maybe not captaincy material, but certainly differential picks, I think, for Game Week 38.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those fixtures where something could come for them just based on, like you say, Watford's poor defence. And we were talking. I mean, one of the reasons we went for Hazard as one of the better captaincy sort of suggestions last week was just because Watford's defence has been really, really poor, especially since the turn of the year. And like you said, eye on that FA Cup final. I mean, that's the sort of factors we have to think about at this stage. Is what teams have got to play for. I mean, I'm just going to list off a few other options that sort of people sort of consider looking at the fixtures. We'll try and go into a bit more detail with them in the Captain Sensible. Obviously, with this final game week of the season, this video is probably the longest captaincy video we've ever done. We're up to about 45 minutes now, but so many people are looking for something different. So there's every reason to look at others. Chris Wood has been looked at by a few people because he's top for big chances in the last 4. I think it's 3 goals and 3 assists in his last 4 home games. He's doing quite well. Some people perhaps looking at Bournemouth assets away at Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace are generally better away than they are at home, and weirdly right now Bournemouth are better away than they are at home. So maybe a Wilson or a Fraser. They've done quite well this season. Mitrovic at home against Newcastle. Mitrovic very good in the air. Newcastle very susceptible to aerial threat. Spurs versus Everton. I had actually looked at that for a triple captaincy back before Kane got his injury. Some people might consider a Spurs asset for that one. Suggestions that Kane might even play because he looked in pretty good shape when he ran on the pitch last night. Although that could have just been a heat at the moment. You never know. But pay attention to the press conferences because if Harry Kane's going to play that game, seems unlikely, yes. But if he's going to play some involvement, maybe worth thinking about. But the thing with all of these different options we're listing off, they sound a bit off the wall. But if that's what people are looking for, then if you're in a situation where you do need something off the wall, then there are definitely people out there.
Yeah, exactly. It's easy to sort of rubbish these suggestions, but there are probably 2 types of captainers this week, aren't they? The type who are either protecting their rank or looking to consolidate a mini league lead, and then those who are not throwing in the towel, but they need something out of the bag to claw the way up, either in overall rank standings or in the leagues. So this is your last attempt to do it. And as I said, traditionally, the last game of the season has been a goal fest. I think in the last 8 seasons, I think it's been over an average of over 3 goals a game in 7 of them. So there will be goals. There will be a humdinger somewhere. We've seen was it the 5-4 last season, Spurs v Leicester.
True, yeah.
There's been 5-5s in the past, 8-1s and things like that. So it's just trying to figure out where that's going to happen. I think you made a good point there with Bournemouth v Palace. I could see that one being a bit of a goal fest. I think Wilson scored 43 points in his last 4 away games. So yeah, there's options to be had around the country, and I'm glad that this is the last one of the season because everyone will have forgot by the time we come back and do this in August. Our rubbish suggestions.
Well, just on that little note, we will have a few more videos between now and the end of the season. We'll have our team news video obviously tomorrow. We're not too sure exactly what time it's going to be because the Premier League and all the clubs have just decided to drop pretty much all 20 press conferences around the sort of same time on Friday afternoon. So we'll just have to keep you posted on when exactly we do that because normally they're evenly spread across Thursday and Friday and we can plan our day around it. But we're kind of twiddling our thumbs a little bit because there's very few press conferences today outside of what we'll hear out of the Europa League games on Thursday night and then loads more tomorrow. Once that'll be the last video before the deadline. Obviously, you can go back and watch the Scoutcast on Tuesday night. You can watch this one again as well on our YouTube channel. We will have one last Scoutcast of the season, and that's going to be on Sunday night. It's sort of an immediate reaction to everything that's just happened, final day of the season. We'll be sort of reviewing the season as well, picking up some lessons learned. Look forward to next season, anything that we might do differently, and maybe have a think about who we think is going to go up hugely in price, and whether or not that's going to change how we plan for next season. So fear not. There's a few more videos now between now and the summer break, and we will see you soon. Yeah. See everyone tomorrow. For the last teams, I think as you say there, it'll probably be late afternoon. Like we usually do it around 2:30, but just the flurry of press conferences, I think it'll probably be late evening. Yeah. So exactly. See everybody tomorrow. Yeah. Goodbye, everybody.